Welcome to the YouTube channel of Equippers Taupo. We believe that 2020 is going to be the year of overflow, so we pray you are blessed by this message.
We've got the amazing Austin. He's going to be on the couch. We've got Jono. We also have got Trevor on the couch, and also the amazing Mike. Mike is going to be on the couch as well. So why don't you come and join us on the two couches this morning? And so if you've got a notepad, if you've got your phone, why don't you open it out, because I know that God's going to speak in and through this conversation this morning. We're really going to hone in on us being sons, fathers, us, having our own dads or being a dad, the experience of those things, but also just maybe looking at John 3:16, where God so loved the world, He gave His only Son, and what that would look like being either the Father or the Son. I think looking at Jesus, his role in that whole thing was pretty harsh. He was given his life for us to really access freedom, but the power in that we actually do have freedom is pretty amazing. And so we're going to get to know these guys a little bit more this morning, and we're just going to open up some questions. But first question is, who are you? Where you come from, how many kids you got, if you got kids, all those sorts of things. So, or how many siblings in your family if you're a son. Yeah, it's on.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Mike Grove. Been in Taupo now for about 17, 18 years. Come down from northwest Auckland back then, so been here a while. I got told when I came down that it takes 20 years before you become a Taupoite, so I'm nearly there.
Almost there, yeah. That's good. How many kids or around?
Okay, we've got 3 children, and one, our little girl's with the Lord. So they're growing up. I think Stephen's nearly 40 now, and Rochelle 38.
Help us out, Pam.
Pam. So yeah,
awesome.
And yeah, really great. Just blessed by them. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm Austin. I think I'm 42. Lost track. Originally born in Oamaru, grew up there in Dunedin. Married to the wonderful Brigida over here. Yep, push her up. We spent most of our married life together in London. We spent nearly 15 years there, and about 3 years ago we moved back to New Zealand. We had 2 or 3 years in Dunedin, and then in January we've moved up here to, we live in Mangakino, so not quite a Taupo resident yet. We've got 3 boys, 13, we've got a teenager, 13, 11 and 9 roughly. Yeah.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Trevor Dowman. I've got 5 children, two girls and 3 boys. The oldest is 52 and the youngest is 36. I came from Taranaki originally. I used to count the cows with a horn sticking out of the mud. And I grew up there, went to Auckland, joined the police force, met my wife in Auckland. She was a nurse and I was a policeman, so we got married and gradually came down to Taupo.
Hey, I'm Jono. I am 26. I am not a dad. Don't really know why.
You're a son. You're a son. Got the son's perspective. Yep.
But yeah, I have been in Taupo for about 14 years, and for those whole 14 years I was at this church. So I've seen it all, which is good and bad. No, it's been awesome. It's been a journey.
How many siblings?
Well, I have a split family. So my mum and dad divorced when I was about 2. And then, so I've got technically 3 full blood brothers and sisters. And then my mum remarried when she met Gary, I don't know, a long time ago. And he had 3 kids. So I've got 6 of us all together, plus me, 7.
Yeah. And so you can keep the mic. Just around, what was your relationship like with your physical dad? in your case, also stepdad, and what was the dynamics of that?
Well, it's always hard, I guess, with a broken kind of marriage and stuff, broken family. So it was quite hard because mum had custody. So it was always quite hard to build that relationship with my dad. We never had a lot of money. So I'd see dad mainly on the weekends and stuff like that. And so dad would just kind of make sure we all had fun. And whenever he dropped us off, he always gave us brought us a $1 mix from the dairy and then sent us off to the mum so that we're all on a sugar high. So that was, that's probably one of the fond memories. And then I never really had a chance to have, my sister and my oldest brother always had an opportunity to live with dad for quite a long period, but I was always with mum, so I never really got to build that relationship with dad. So it's probably lacking a little bit, but we're finally starting to kind of build a relationship now, and he comes over and helps out quite a lot and stuff like that. So it's good to kind of finally reconnect. I actually had, he came up, he's up this weekend, he's over with my sister over in Mankino, but he came up and he stayed at my place on Friday, and I took him out for dinner, because my wife's at home, and she just wasn't fit, she was a little bit sick, so I just took him out for dinner, just me and him, and we just talked. It was actually really good. He just opened up about the whole breakup and how much it affected him not being able to actually have a relationship with me and stuff like that, and it was quite amazing. But yeah, then my mum kind of remarried, and I started to form a relationship with Gary as well, and so I just could see him as I've got two dads, so it was just quite awesome.
Great.
Same question.
What was the question? Yep, same question.
Yeah, my dad was one of those farmers who was very quiet. He grew up during the war years, and he didn't tell you that he loved you, but you knew that he did. And I'd always wanted him to tell me that he loved me. And I didn't get a chance. And anyway, he was dying of emphysema. I was up at the New Plymouth Hospital. So I went to see him, and I began to talk to him about the Lord. I said to him, "Do you want to give your heart to the Lord?" And he says, "I've been wanting to do that all my life." And here he was at 73 years of age, and he'd been wanting to do it all his life. And then he told me, he said, I remember when your mother died. My mother died when I was about 13. And she suddenly sat up in bed and reached out and started speaking in this strange-sounding language. And that said something to him. He didn't share it with anybody because he thought people would laugh at him. So I took him to Scripture and showed him how people speak in tongues who believe in Jesus. And he gave his heart to the Lord. So that was an extra special blessing for me.
Try and keep it together, all this emotional talk about fathers, especially when your father's not nearby. I was extremely blessed to have a great father. Grew up in a Christian family. He's still with us, of course, but great father, very hardworking, providing father. He had a hard upbringing. His father died when he was 13, so he was the man of the house from a very young age. So part of he had not a hard heart, that's not the right word, but probably a similar characteristic of not being really expressive and kind of get your head down and work hard, but awesome father. Yeah, and we had a very loving family, so it was great upbringing for me.
Yeah, my father was, it seems like in our age group, all much the same. He was wasn't very expressive, his love, but I know that he loved me. We grew up on a farm at South Kaipara Heads, and but he showed his love. He was always loving and kind. I remember he bought a whole set of picture Bibles, I don't know, probably about 5 when I was, and I still, to this day, I've still got the whole set, and I remember it just so, the joy of when he opened up and started reading from those to me. So, yeah, while he was, he never really spoke a lot about the Lord to us, but he did just from the Bible. He attended, or we're way out in the country there, it was just combined service on Sundays out in the hall out at South Head. But yeah, it just, I guess that was enough to instill in me. And while he was, he couldn't talk much, and I'm probably was the opposite way. But I remember when I got to around that teenage years, and you're getting out, and I remember, where you start really looking at things and people and Christians and whatever. And I remember saying to him one time there, Dad, I think that just most Christians I know, that they're hypocrites. I was about 13, and he didn't say a word, but he just looked at me and he smiled. And he didn't answer back, and there was nothing there except just love and a smile. And that said it all.
Come on. The next question is, maybe what have you learnt from your dad that you actually took into being a dad yourself, or maybe going to become a father eventually? What are things that you looked from your dad and thought, yeah, I want to be like that? Or maybe if you want to share the things that you didn't want to be like. You got the mic, you might as well go.
Yeah, the main thing I learnt from my dad was, while he was very quiet, he always just showed his love and how he was through actions, and just how he was. And I guess that's what I loved about him too, or grew to really love about him. There was this, because he didn't talk much, and he couldn't talk much for whatever reason, he didn't talk much, even about the Lord. You saw it by, he still faithfully all his life went to church. And I guess I just looked at that, and what I saw in him was something of God and a father. Father God. Yeah. And that's probably more than anything. There's not a lot to say except that. And what it did for me is that, I guess, there was many years probably. I wasn't till I was about, over 25 before I always believed in the Lord from what he'd taught. And I always, I prayed, God blessed my life in lots of ways, but it wasn't till, it got to about 25 that we're a bit older, and we lost our first daughter, and that was when I really had to Jesus, I need to know whether you're either the biggest fake that ever lived, or you're exactly who you say you are.
Yeah, come on.
And of course he is.
Right.
Which is, it's much more to it than that. But with my dad, that was the main thing that, I'm quite different to him. I'm probably much more like my mother. But I just like to be able to talk lots. And anyway, so I'll pass it over.
Awesome. I think one great thing my father did, or one of my parents, they always took us to church and then to the youth group as well, and they ended up becoming leaders of the youth group, and so we were always there and always going, and they were always trying to make life fun and church fun for us. And so it's always good, I value and treasure the church environment and just getting to know people and hanging out, and that's always been great. But on a personal level, I think it's just the quality time, having actual time with him. And I mean, my dad was really into rugby, and I'm really not. Probably more like my mum, but like you. So we used to spend all Saturdays was a rugby-related day, whether he was, when he was younger, playing rugby and then refereeing rugby or watching rugby, and then you come home and then watch more rugby on TV. And I didn't enjoy it, but it was just the sitting together and hanging out, just the doing stuff together. Like, he'd always take us tramping and hiking, and every summer we'd go on a trip like that. And he loved cycling, and so I picked up this. I'm mad for cycling as well, because we always just got out and did cycling stuff, doing stuff together. He was present in that.
Yeah.
One thing I've sadly picked up, which I regret, is from my father, is also he'd lose his temper quite easily with over stuff. But maybe that's a learned trait or something. But yeah.
It's a work in progress, right? Yeah.
There's not a lot to tell about my father. I'll finish with the last question I was asked. He did tell me that he loved me. I told him when I led him to the Lord that I loved him, and he told me he loved me, so it was the icing on the cake. But no, he was a very quiet man. He didn't criticise people or judge other people. And so I probably learned, that's probably what I mainly learned from him. He was a quiet man, got on with his own job, let other people live as they wanted to live, and just got on with it.
Having like a broken family, I mean, it's so common in this world, which is actually really sad. But I think that one of the main things that I learned from my dad was he always just put his head down and put us first. No matter what, he would always just be out there working, doing what he can to just try to provide in some sort of way to us, or just in his own leadership, and just show that we could have fun without having abundant money or anything like that, so that we could just live life to the fullest without having everything that we needed. But God's always kind of placed key people in my life when I needed them, key father figures and stuff like that, which is always kind of a blessing. I mean, when you need someone to kind of look up to, you have that person. And when you have like a father that, you know, he lived in Wellington and we lived up here, so I couldn't really just kind of just see him. And back then the technology wasn't the same, obviously, so you can't just Skype or FaceTime your parents and stuff like that. So it was like God always placed people when I needed them, and I just looked up to people. I looked up to what I wanted to be like. I also, having like a broken family, there was a lot of temper and a lot of fighting and stuff that I saw that I probably shouldn't have saw. A lot of abuse. So that's probably one of the things I learned that I didn't want to do, was have that temper. So you literally can't get me angry. And if I do get angry, I'm angry for like 1 second and then it's done. So it's just, that's probably one thing that I'm pretty thankful that I learned. I just didn't want to be like that. I didn't want to have that rage. So that's probably, things.
Well, that's good. I think you touched on as well how people don't necessarily need to be your biological father to actually have an impact on your life. That's what I love about church, is that we're just a big family. We're a big community, that it doesn't matter if we're blood related, you've still got the ability to speak into people's lives. And so, you know, I love that we're a church of generations, that we're not just an older church or a younger church. We actually are a church that cover a lot of generations. And if you're at the top end of the generational scale, you know, you've still got so much to input into our younger people that are coming in, because a sad reality is our world is messed up. Our world is broken, and there's so many more broken families around, even that I can identify from my parents' generation. That generation, it was, you know, it wasn't even just frowned upon about marriage breaking up and things like that. It was like borderline illegal. That just doesn't happen. Now it's like people are scared to get married because they don't want it to break up. And so you've got people that are in relationship over years and years and years and have kids and then break up and go different. And it just messes up a lot of what the kids have to go through. And that's why I think it's cool having Jono on the couch, because it gives us that different dynamic of what family looks like. But also just around how our relationship with our Father can actually shape our relationship with how we relate to God. You know, whatever our relationship was with our own Father can actually be a negative way of how we relate to God, because I was always taught that God was good, but then looking at my own father, there was certain things that I thought, if you're like God, then, you know, it put questions in my mind. It put questions around those things of, how come you say God's good, but then you go and do this or something like that? And so that for me was a little trigger. I was thinking, how do I relate to God? And I realized from a young age that I was relating to God, that if I did something wrong, that I would get punished because I was wrong and all those sorts of things. But God loves us so much. He actually cares about us so much. It's not so much about punishing us, it's about discipline. You know, it's about actually teaching us that there's so many better ways to live life, so many better things to pursue than just living in the dog box all the time, thinking I'm going to be in trouble and I'm going to get punished because of this. And so I guess going along that line of where you have related to your own father, how has that put your perspective of who God is as a father as well? Whether it warped it or solidified who God is and his character. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I was always brought up in church, so that's one thing I am kind of stoked about, is that no matter kind of what the situation was with mum and stuff, that she always made sure that we went to church on a Sunday. So I always kind of had church around and had God. I knew who he was. Although after a Sunday, it's a completely different life. It wasn't really, God was in the house all the time. We just prayed at dinner time, and that was about it, really. So it's quite hard to kind of connect, where is God in this? But then when Mum met Gary and we decided to move up here, that's kind of when I found my own faith. I went to a conference up in Auckland and then kind of found who God was and found out that he could be your father, that he could kind of lead that space for you as well, and that he could be who I needed him to be. So I think it was more like I could just talk to him at any time and he wouldn't judge me and he wouldn't kind of think that was bad, or because I was quite enclosed when in my teenage years. I kept everything to myself, and basically God was my father figure. So I just kind of spoke to him and he would speak to me back and then place people in my life that I needed them, and he just helped kind of keep me stable, because obviously because of that whole Christian lifestyle bringing up, I wasn't really a Christian 24/7 as a teenager, and I'd do dumb stuff during the week and then come to youth on a Friday, and then after that Friday, go do more dumb stuff. And so it's just knowing that I could just speak to him and just be like, I'm sorry, God, I'm not worthy to have you in my life, but somehow you want to use me to change people's lives. And I think that's probably what I was just so happy for, was just to speak to him about that.
Yeah, my father was, as I said, a very quiet man. He didn't. I found it hard to find God as a father over the years. I wound up getting into performance orientation and getting mentally ill. Was in the hospital for about 16 weeks and had about an 11-year span of mental illness. Wasn't really due to my father, but it was due to teachers and those who always tried to make me do more, or it wasn't good enough. And so I wound up getting into performance orientation and wound up in a mental hospital. Had 10 years of mental illness till I got healed. And God healed me just over a matter of 9 months. And he began to show me from that point what he was like as a father.
For me, I think from going to church from a really young age, and I think God became real to me probably when I was about 10. I think I just understood the differentiation that God was the perfect father versus my father. Not to say that he was poles apart. It was just God was, my father was human just like me, and we all fall short. And God still loved me, and he still loved my father. And so there's this, I understood the differentiation that God was perfect and the perfect father, and I could know his presence and know his forgiveness and know his love. And it was, my father would make mistakes just like I would. So I don't think I ever struggled with my father not being perfect. It was, yeah, I didn't judge him by the same standard of having to live up to God. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the one thing that I ended up, it was always there, but, Dad was very quiet, and so it was more Mum, I guess, was the one who, the saying is, wore the pants in the family, but, Dad was very quiet, but Mum, I don't know, for some reason, I was the fourth child, the last one, and I don't know, I just always found it, I always not really thought I wasn't accepted, but I was the odd one out in the family, and so my life was, and I don't know where, I'm looking back now, I mean, Mum's with the Lord now, but I used to just get sort of shut off or whatever, and I didn't know why. Didn't know why it ever. And so they always said that I was the rebel. Maybe I was. I don't know, but it wasn't my intention, always my parents. And so I remember from early stage, and maybe Mum had postnatal depression or something, and I'm only talking this now, but some of the things she used to always just, if there's anything inside there, she'd just like put you straight out the door and slam the door and you'd be shut outside. Yeah. And it's a funny thing, I never knew until some of the deepest things, and with God, I mean, even after God had showed me what a father he was, that, I don't know, we go through different stages of things, and there came a time after a few years where I thought exactly the same thing, and God had shut the door, and there were big doors in heaven on me, and it was a terrible time. And all of that's worked through now and whatever, but it's funny how some of the things from your early life, and I was always like, it wasn't till Mum right at the end of her life came back down, saw us, it was down here, and I used to ask Mum why, like all the rest of the family basically got everything and there was nothing for me, and I always said to her, I went right at the end and she came down, I think to talk. She knew that, and I said, why did you never, and she says, Michael, you never needed help. And I was, Mum, if you only knew. Yeah. Just, what life is. And she says, oh, no, we never did because you never needed help. And it was just one of the things, I guess, working through some of the things you don't get and work out until you're about 65. And it's finally, you're working all that through things. But what it did do is it made me, I guess, back then is that, two things, or made you get out and just go for yourself. You weren't going to get anything, so you learnt you just had to get out and go for yourself. But I also learnt, and this is for many years there, I always prayed and talked to the Lord, but I wasn't born again, as I say, till much later, probably nearer 30, but I always had to, if you couldn't there, then I just turned to God and relied on God all my life through as a young guy and teenager. And amazingly, he used to just answer so much right then, and I wasn't born again. But he knows. So just I don't know. Is that what were we talking
What
about?
was the question? What was the question?
Yeah.
I think
some of the.
yeah, it's amazing because God is the father to the fatherless, and it doesn't make sense. Like I don't know if you were here last week hearing Phil on the couch as well about this whole thing of peace beyond understanding, and I think there's a lot to God that we just can't wrap our head around, because God's got this level of mystery that we're constantly unwrapping and finding more about God. But one thing I know that is true, that God is the father to the fatherless. And it's close to me, because Tere was an only child, and her dad left when she was 3 months old. And so she never grew up with a dad, but she grew up with her grandfather. And coming into church, it was like I finally found what was missing in my life. And she can tell her own story, but it's around that side of when there's things missing in your life, I know that God can fit it. There's a God-shaped hole in everyone's heart that only He can fill. And everyone is searching for so many things in life, but we only really truly find life where we lose our own life and find God. And so, I encourage you, if you did grow up without a father, if you male, female, doesn't matter where you fit in this, but find God for who He is. He is a great Father. He is an amazing, person who really loves you no matter what. It's not conditional. God's love is unconditional. And I guess the last question, just around John 3:16, so, for God so loved the world that He gave His only Son. What sort of picture of love is that to you, and how personal can you make that? How God sent His own Son that you can have freedom, but also the sacrifice side of it, of being a father and thinking what God went through to actually sacrifice His own Son so that we can live in that freedom. Just a short answer, that would be good.
That's a big question. There's just so much to that, and it's just it's hard to even describe, really, just when you learn the love that God the Father has. I'll talk personally for me, and just in the ways that He's showed it to me over the years, and especially for a start when I first came to Him. It was pretty dramatic, but it's the Father's heart, and you just look into His heart and the love that He has for you, that and He's prepared to. He's broken, and He sent, when Jesus came, I realised, He was broken for me, and there's no end to it, to what He will do for me, to keep going. And it doesn't matter what, even if all the things that I've had to sort out in my life with Him and go through, but it's just a love that He has there for me, always. Even when I think that He's not there, and when I went through a time of thinking He'd closed the door on me, really all that happened from that was it got to the end, and it's okay, Lord, even if you never talk to me again in this life, I still will stay the same, Lord. I still believe in you. I still will stay with you, Lord. Yeah. And I think that's what He wanted, because after that, it just came back, and I realised that, of course, He would. He still does, every day. So that it's just you can't describe it. It's a father's heart that just, and that's what I've tried to, in the same way with my children, to show that. And I guess they break you. And not in a bad way, but it's you're broken by them. I want them to see the same heart that I've learnt from God the Father, our Father. And I'll pass that on.
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge as a father when you know God the Father to replicate that love. And when you think about God giving His only Son, and you understand, I know that I've messed up in life, I've done things wrong, and I feel the disappointment, and I know God must feel the disappointment, but just knowing that He died for that, to send His Holy Spirit to set us free from all that, to carry His love in our hearts always, and yeah, knowing that to be the same father to my children is a real challenge.
Yeah, when I got born again, I was completely transformed. I was turned around, completely around 180 degrees. I was going that way one minute, and then I was going this way. My whole life was just transformed and changed. I realised God gives you a role in life as a father, as He is a father, and that's one of His ways of explaining Himself. If you can get that, God is the Father, and He creates fathers in heaven and on earth. He gives you the role of being a father, so you can learn to understand what it's like to be a father. And I find that it's grown on me over the years. I never tell my kids. I always tell my kids that I love them every time I see them. Make sure that they know that they're loved. It's one of the things you need to do as a father. Tell them you're loved, because as Kiwis we often don't show our love to our children. We sort of you'll be right, but they need to hear that you love them, and that love comes from the Father, and you've got a Father in heaven who loves you too.
Yeah, so good. For me, obviously, I'm not a dad yet, so I don't know that love that a parent will have for a kid yet, that unconditional love. But for me to give my proper answer, I have to give you a little bit of a story. So when I was obviously had a breakup, a broken family and stuff at a very young age, and we were always moving houses and never could really find anything. So when I was about 4 years old, I was actually molested, and so I've had to kind of live with that and it took me a long time, and only in my teen years did I actually know what kind of happened, and so that was always kind of a battle for me, and having a broken family, I was like the middle child, so there's 2 young to me and there's 4 above me, and I was always kind of the person that I never really wanted to get involved in the arguments, and I was always like the counselor of the family, because I knew pain and I knew how people felt, so I'm a very empathetic person, and I always put myself in someone else's shoes and always feel that kind of love that God must have felt for Jesus and for us, and so I always kind of did that, and always, even my mum would come to me, like when Mum and Gary had a big fight or something like that, Mum would actually come to me for advice as the teenager, which is kind of warped, but God's given me a wisdom that's beyond understanding. And so I used what happened to me as a stepping stone, and I forgave the person and stuff like that when I was about 15, and from that point I just wanted to help anyone that I could that was lacking. I wanted to be like, well, I know pain and I know hurt and I've done dumb stuff, and so I've walked a pretty crazy story. If one day maybe we'll get to share it, but I've just wanted to help people. And I looked and I read that scripture when I was young, and I was like, how can a person give up their only son? That pain that God must have felt, and then hearing the words that your son say, God, why have you forsaken me? Like, even though he knows what he's doing, like, Jesus was still human. He still felt pain. And then hearing, as a father, knowing what you're doing to your son, and then hearing those words, I mean, like, you just can't even imagine how he felt. But he knew that, obviously we needed it. We needed that sacrifice. So anything that I could do to help anyone, I was willing to do. And that's a fault. Obviously, sometimes it can be pretty bad. But it also helps, I believe, it helps a lot of people. But yeah, it's kind of a little bit of my story.
Anything else, Pastor Jono?
That
was awesome. Coffee time. Come on, can we give it up for these guys? Awesome time. You can grab your seats. Man, How good to hear just stories and different point of views, different backgrounds, different things going on and upbringings and all those sorts of things. But it comes back to the fact that Jesus is the cornerstone. That God loved us so much that He would go through all that pain. All of that He went through for you. All of that He went through for every single one of us, not just in this room, but in this world. Every one of us are loved by God. Doesn't matter how far we run in the opposite direction, God's grace will chase us down. The Bible said He will never leave us. He will never forsake us. He will always be on the pursuit.